The air hung heavy over the broken village, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow every sound. Dust drifted lazily in the fading light, settling on shattered windows and cracked walls. Sergeant Emma Hayes stepped carefully, her boots barely making a sound on the rubble-strewn ground. She carried no rifle, no obvious weapon, only a small satchel strapped securely to her back. To anyone watching, she appeared vulnerable, just a lone woman in enemy territory. But Emma was far from defenseless. Years of training had sharpened her senses until she could feel danger long before it arrived. Her heart beat steady, matching the slow rhythm of her steps as she scanned every shadow, every corner. The enemy thought she was easy prey, someone they could catch off guard without effort. They didn't know what she carried inside her, a calm resolve and a mind honed to survive. She moved deeper into the village, every instinct alert. The wind whispered through the ruins, carrying distant voices and footsteps. Emma paused, crouching behind a crumbled wall, peering down a narrow alley. 5 men were moving carefully, their boots crunching softly on broken glass. They hadn't noticed her yet, but their conversation carried clearly in the quiet air. "Unarmed," one muttered. "No weapons, just a woman." Another laughed quietly, the sound low and cruel. "She won't be any trouble." Emma's eyes narrowed. They believed their own story, that she was defenseless, harmless. But she had learned long ago never to trust what the enemy thought. Their arrogance was their greatest weakness. She took a slow breath and shifted her weight, ready to move again. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that stretched across the shattered street. Her fingers brushed against the small pouch at her waist, a few simple tools, nothing more. No gun, no knife, just the skills she had spent years perfecting. The first man stepped closer, unaware of the eyes watching him from the shadows. Emma's muscles tensed like a spring ready to release. Time seemed to slow. She remembered every lesson, every drill drilled into her by instructors who demanded perfection. This was more than a mission. It was survival. The man glanced around, his confidence growing as he scanned the empty street. Then, without warning, Emma struck. Her hand shot out faster than he could react. A sharp strike to the neck sent him silently to the ground, eyes wide with shock. The others froze. The sound of his body hitting the rubble echoed sharply in the stillness. They turned, alarm spreading across their faces like wildfire. The woman they had dismissed as harmless had just claimed the first victim. Panic flickered in their eyes, but they tried to steady themselves. They thought 5 men could overpower one unarmed woman. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Emma didn't wait for them to attack. She moved quickly, blending grace with lethal precision. Each step was calculated, every movement a mix of speed and control. Her breath remained steady even as her heart beat faster. The shadows stretched longer, and the village seemed to hold its breath. Emma knew the next moments would decide everything, not just her life, but the success of the mission and the lives of those counting on her. As the remaining men lunged forward, she met them head-on. Her body flowed like water, using their momentum against them. One by one, they hit the ground, stunned and silent. In just over a minute, the scene was over. 5 men lay motionless, and Emma stood alone, unarmed but undefeated. Her eyes scanned the horizon, knowing this was only the beginning. The village was silent again, but Emma's presence had changed everything. Those who underestimated her would never forget the lesson she had just taught them. The enemy soldiers whispered among themselves, their voices laced with overconfidence. "She's unarmed," one said with a smirk. "Just a lone woman wandering into our territory." Another chuckled. "We'll have her before she even knows what hit her." Their footsteps were cautious, but sure as they closed in, unaware that their fatal mistake had already been made. Emma crouched behind the shattered remains of a wall, her breath steady, her body taut with readiness. She watched their every move, feeling the weight of their underestimation pressing against her like a heavy fog. Years of experience told her that arrogance was a dangerous thing in battle, and these men wore it like armor. But arrogance made them careless, predictable. The 5 men moved in a loose formation, their weapons slung loosely, eyes scanning the ruins as if expecting an easy prize. They hadn't seen her yet, hadn't sensed the storm waiting quietly in the shadows. Emma's mind raced, calculating the best way to turn their confidence into chaos. Her hands brushed over the small tools strapped to her belt, simple gadgets, but in her skilled hands, deadly. She didn't need a gun. What she needed was silence, speed, and precision. The enemy's assumption that she was unarmed was their downfall. One of the men stepped forward, slowing to get a better look. His eyes locked on Emma for the briefest second before he shrugged and signaled the others to advance. That's when Emma's muscles coiled, ready to spring. Without a sound, she launched herself forward. Her first strike was lightning fast, a sharp blow to the side of the man's neck that dropped him before he could cry out. The others barely had time to react before chaos erupted. The second man charged, but Emma twisted, using his own momentum to send him crashing into a nearby wall. Her movement was fluid, a deadly dance perfected through countless hours of training. Each strike was measured, aimed to incapacitate quickly and silently. The remaining 3 froze for a heartbeat, stunned by what they were seeing. How could one woman, with no visible weapons, take down 2 trained soldiers so effortlessly? Their hesitation cost them. Emma pressed the advantage. She moved with relentless determination, striking, dodging, and weaving through the ruins. Her hands became instruments of swift justice, disarming, disabling, and overwhelming. One by one, the men faltered, their confidence shattered. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that flickered across the battlefield. Time felt suspended as Emma fought not just for survival, but to protect the mission and her comrades relying on her. When the 5th man finally fell, silence reclaimed the village. Emma stood alone among the motionless bodies, breathing heavily but steady. She knew the danger wasn't over. The enemy forces beyond this group would soon realize what had happened. But for now, she had won the impossible. Her eyes scanned the horizon, calculating the next move. The mission wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that strength didn't always come from weapons, but from skill, courage, and unyielding will. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small radio. Her fingers steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. A quick signal to her unit, a silent call for backup. Emma's fight had been quiet, unexpected, and deadly. She had shattered the enemy's assumptions and rewritten the rules of engagement. As she melted back into the shadows, the echoes of her victory lingered, a powerful reminder that in war, appearances can be deceiving, and true strength often lies beneath the surface. In the seconds after the last man hit the ground, a heavy silence settled over the village. Emma's breath came steady, but inside, a storm of adrenaline raged. The enemy's confidence had been shattered in less than a minute, and now the real test began, escaping before more soldiers arrived. Her eyes darted across the rubble-strewn street, searching for the safest path. Every instinct screamed at her to move fast, but she knew rushing blindly would be a fatal mistake. The enemy was unpredictable and well-trained. One wrong step, and it could all come crashing down. She crouched low, pressing her back against the cold stone wall, listening. Footsteps echoed in the distance, reinforcements. They were coming. Emma's fingers grazed the side of her satchel, steadying herself. No weapons, but plenty of tools, and most importantly, her training. She had been prepared for this moment, trained to survive, to outthink, to outfight even when outgunned. The quiet she relied on now was as important as any gunshot in battle. A rustle nearby caught her attention. She turned sharply, eyes narrowing as a stray cat darted from the shadows. The tension eased for a split second, But Emma knew the calm was temporary. The enemy would be swarming this area soon, and she had to be gone before they did. Her mind flashed back to everything that had brought her here. The endless drills, the nights spent studying enemy tactics, the sacrifices made to be more than just a soldier, a survivor. The mission was critical. Gathering intelligence from this village could turn the tide of the conflict. Failure was not an option. The first sounds of shouting came from around the corner. Harsh voices, the crackle of radios. Emma's heart pounded louder, matching the urgency in her muscles. She slipped through the narrow alleyways, moving like a ghost through the broken ruins. Each step was measured, every breath controlled. She paused by a pile of rubble, peering out carefully. 5 enemy soldiers were rushing toward the spot where their comrades had fallen. Panic was clear on their faces, confusion giving way to determination. They expected resistance, but nothing like what Emma had delivered. Emma's mind raced. She had to find her unit and deliver the intel. The mission depended on it. She clenched her jaw and pushed forward, keeping to the shadows, slipping past debris and broken walls. The enemy was closing in, but she was faster, smarter. A sudden noise behind her made her freeze, a loose stone rolling across the ground. The soldiers spun around, weapons raised. Emma's heart stopped for a moment, but she forced herself to stay calm. Her eyes locked with the nearest soldiers, a silent battle of wills. She was unarmed, but not defenseless. Without hesitation, Emma dropped low and surged forward, catching the soldier off guard. A swift strike to his arm sent his weapon clattering to the ground. Another quick move, and she was behind him, pulling him down silently. The others shouted in alarm, but she was already disappearing into the maze of ruins. The chase was on. Emma's lungs burned as she sprinted, weaving through narrow passages, her mind a whirlwind of strategy and survival. She could hear the enemy regrouping, searching, calling out. Every second counted. Finally, she spotted a familiar figure, a fellow soldier signaling from a hidden vantage point. Relief flooded her as she sprinted toward him, dropping the satchel and handing over the gathered intel. The weight of the moment hit her. This was more than a mission. It was a turning point. As her unit prepared to move out, Emma cast one last glance back at the village. The quiet battlefield was now alive with enemy movement, but she had already changed the course of the fight. Her unarmed victory had stunned them, shattered their confidence, and bought precious time. Emma felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. The odds had been against her, but her skill and resolve had turned the impossible into reality. The fight was far from over, but this victory was hers. She moved with her unit, disappearing into the night, ready for whatever came next. Emma's footsteps were light but urgent as she moved through the crumbling streets, every sense alert to the dangers lurking in the shadows. The village was alive with distant shouts and the pounding of boots, enemy reinforcements closing in fast. She had no weapon, no backup close enough to help, just her training and instinct sharp as a blade. The fading light cast long, distorted shadows against broken walls, turning every corner into a potential threat. Emma's eyes flicked from one shadow to the next, calculating her path, her body tight and ready to react in an instant. Every sound, the crunch of gravel, the snap of a twig, carried weight now, could mean the difference between escape and capture. Her breath came steady, controlled. Panic was the enemy she could not afford to fight. She moved with purpose, silent but deadly, weaving through narrow alleys and ducking behind debris. She wasn't just running. She was hunting for survival, for victory. Behind her, she heard the heavy breathing of pursuit. 3 enemy soldiers were gaining ground, their footsteps growing louder, their voices harsh with urgency. Emma glanced back briefly, her eyes sharp and calculating. She couldn't outrun them all, not in a straight fight. Suddenly, a tight corner offered a chance. Emma spun around swiftly, using the element of surprise. One man nearly ran into her fist, a precise strike to his jaw sending him crashing to the ground, stunned before he could shout an alarm. The other two hesitated, confusion flashing across their faces. Emma didn't wait. She was already moving, ducking low, and slipping past the stunned soldier. The others charged, but she was faster, dodging left, then right, using their momentum to her advantage. Her body moved instinctively, trained years ago for moments just like this. A narrow staircase leading down into a dark cellar offered sanctuary. Emma slipped inside, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. She paused, listening, heart pounding. Footsteps thundered above, voices shouting in frustration. The enemy was searching, but she was gone, just a shadow swallowed by the darkness. The cellar was cold and damp, but Emma's mind was clear. She retrieved a small radio from her satchel, whispering a quick message to her unit. Area compromised. Extraction needed in 5 minutes. Hold position. Her voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the tension pulsing through her veins. The seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last. She could hear the enemy moving above, their frustrated curses bouncing off stone walls. Emma pressed her back against the cold cellar wall, silent and still, waiting for her team. Her mind replayed every second of the encounter, the men who underestimated her, the swift strikes, the desperate chase. She had been unarmed, yes, but she was never defenseless. Every move had been calculated, every breath held in the balance between life and death. Then, faint footsteps approached below. Emma's eyes locked on the shadow at the cellar entrance. It was her team, coming for her. Relief washed over her, sharp and sweet. She stood and moved toward them, her body aching but unbroken. Together, they slipped out into the night, leaving the village behind, a place where 5 men had fallen to one unarmed woman, and where courage had rewritten the rules of survival. Emma knew this was only the beginning. The mission would continue, the fight would rage on. But in that moment, she had proven something vital. Strength wasn't measured by the weapons you carried, but by the will and skill you wielded. As they disappeared into the darkness, Emma glanced back one last time, ready for whatever lay ahead. Emma's body ached, but her mind was sharper than ever. Every movement she had made during the fight, every breath she took while running through the broken village, had been a test of endurance, skill, and willpower. Now, as she moved with her unit through the dimly lit forest bordering the war zone, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold awareness of what was still to come. The mission wasn't over. The enemy had been caught off guard by her sudden and deadly strike, but they would not forget. They would regroup, retaliate. Emma's role was crucial. Deliver the intelligence she had gathered, and prepare her team for what lay ahead. Her hands tightened around the radio in her pack. Communication was their lifeline, and she knew how important it was to keep every detail clear and concise. Every word could mean the difference between victory and disaster. Her fingers moved quickly, sending updates and receiving orders. The forest around them was silent, save for the distant call of night birds and the crunch of leaves underfoot. The tension was palpable, everyone moving with heightened caution. Emma glanced at her comrades, each face illuminated by the faint glow of their flashlights, eyes alert and searching. They trusted her not just as a soldier, but as a leader in this critical moment. Emma's thoughts drifted briefly to the 5 men she had taken down, each one a reminder of how quickly the tide could turn. They had underestimated her, and that mistake had cost them dearly. It was a lesson she hoped no one on her side would forget. Confidence was only as strong as the skill behind it. Suddenly, the crack of a twig snapping nearby made her freeze. Instinctively, she signaled her team to halt, lowering her body closer to the ground. Her eyes scanned the shadows between the trees. Movement. Too quick to be a deer. Enemy scouts. She moved silently toward a large oak tree, peering around its rough bark. 2 soldiers in dark uniforms crept through the underbrush, speaking in hushed tones. Emma's heart beat steadily. She had seconds to act. Without hesitation, she crept behind them, her hands steady despite the pounding of her heart. The first soldier didn't hear her approach until it was too late. A sharp strike to the back of his head dropped him instantly. The second spun around, weapon raised, but Emma was faster, sidestepping a shot and delivering a disabling blow that sent him sprawling. The forest returned to silence, broken only by Emma's soft breaths. She quickly checked the fallen men for weapons and intelligence before signaling her team to continue. Every moment counted. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. As they pushed deeper into the woods, Emma's mind raced. The enemy was organized, persistent, and dangerous. But she had an advantage: knowledge, skill, and the will to survive. Her team relied on her now more than ever. The night air grew colder, and the faint outline of their rendezvous point appeared ahead, a small clearing illuminated by the soft glow of a waiting vehicle. Relief washed over Emma, but she didn't relax. There was still danger lurking, and the mission was far from complete. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The fight had tested her body, but it had strengthened her resolve. She was unarmed, yet she had faced down 5 men and lived to tell the tale. Now, she would lead her team through whatever challenges lay ahead. As they approached the extraction point, Emma's eyes met those of her commanding officer. No words were needed. They both knew this mission had changed everything. Emma's courage had turned the impossible into reality. And this was only the beginning. The night air was sharp and cold as Emma climbed into the waiting vehicle, the soft hum of the engine breaking the heavy silence that had settled over her team. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but her mind was far from calm. The events of the last hour replayed in vivid detail. 5 men taken down without firing a single shot, the chase through the village, the narrow escape through the forest. She knew this mission was unlike any she had ever faced. As the vehicle rumbled away from the edge of the war zone, Emma's thoughts raced. The enemy's reaction would be swift. News of her unexpected strike would spread quickly, and their determination to find her would only grow stronger. She had no illusions about the danger ahead. But for now, she focused on the small victory. She had survived, and her team was intact. The vehicle's interior was dim, the low murmur of quiet conversations and rustling gear filling the space. Emma glanced around at her comrades, their faces etched with exhaustion, but shining with respect. They had seen what she could do, and the impact of her actions was already evident in their eyes. Her commanding officer approached, his expression serious but tinged with something else, a quiet admiration. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "you changed the game today. No one expected what you did. You're a testament to what skill and courage can accomplish." Emma nodded, her jaw tight. "It wasn't just me," she replied. "The mission was a team effort. We all played a part." But deep down, she knew the moment was hers. The impossible had been made possible by a woman without a gun, relying on her wits and strength. The vehicle slowed as it approached the base. Emma's thoughts shifted to what awaited her there: debriefings, medical checks, and the constant planning for the next move. She was tired, but she knew the fight was far from over. Inside the base, the hum of activity was a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the village. Soldiers moved purposefully, technology buzzed, and strategies were mapped out on glowing screens. Emma was led to a secure room where the debrief would take place. The officers gathered, eyes sharp as they listened to her recount every detail. Emma spoke clearly, focusing on the facts: the enemy's movements, the layout of the village, the 5 men who had underestimated her. Her voice carried the weight of experience, her words painting a picture of courage and precision. After the debrief, Emma was escorted to the medical bay. The doctors examined her thoroughly. Bruises, scrapes, and fatigue were evident, but no serious injuries. As they tended to her wounds, Emma's mind drifted to the bigger picture. This mission was a turning point, not just for her, but for the entire operation. Later, alone in her quarters, Emma allowed herself a moment to reflect. The day's events had tested her in ways she hadn't imagined. She had faced danger without a weapon and emerged victorious. But the cost was clear. The enemy would be watching, waiting for their chance to strike back. Determination settled in her chest like a steady flame. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every soldier, every innocent caught in the crossfire. And she would be ready. The night deepened, shadows stretching long across the room. Emma's eyes closed briefly, gathering strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But she was ready. Her story was far from over. Outside, the base buzzed with life and strategy. But inside Emma's quiet room, a warrior prepared for the battles still to come. The morning light filtered through the narrow window, casting a pale glow across Emma's sparse quarters. She sat quietly on the edge of the cot, her fingers tracing the faint scars on her knuckles. The memories of the past night were still vivid. 5 men, taken down in under a minute, their shocked faces etched into her mind. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message. The room buzzed faintly with the distant sounds of the base coming to life. Soldiers preparing, radios crackling with updates, orders being whispered and relayed. Emma stood and moved to the small desk, where a stack of reports awaited her attention. Her mission was far from over, and the intelligence she had gathered was crucial. Every detail mattered. She studied the maps spread across the table, tracing the enemy's movements with a practiced eye. The village she had infiltrated was only one of many strongholds. The men she had encountered were just the first wave. More were coming, and they would be better prepared. The mission was evolving, and Emma's role was growing in importance. Her commanding officer entered the room quietly, his expression unreadable. "Emma," he said, "your actions last night have given us an edge. The intel you brought back is invaluable. But the enemy won't be sitting still. They're mobilizing, and we need to be ready." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "What's the plan?" He pulled up a chair, pointing to the map. "We're launching a coordinated strike on their supply lines and communication hubs. If we can cut off their resources, we can weaken their hold on the region. We want you to lead a small team, quiet, precise, like you did in the village." Her heart quickened. The mission was dangerous, but Emma was ready. The fight wasn't just about brute force, it was about intelligence, strategy, and skill. Her unarmed victory had proven that. She spent the next hours preparing, assembling her team of specialists, each chosen for their unique skills. They moved with efficiency, checking gear, reviewing plans, and running through scenarios. Emma's leadership was calm and confident, inspiring those around her. As they moved out under the cover of darkness, the forest swallowed their footsteps once more. The air was thick with tension, but Emma's focus was razor-sharp. Every sound was a signal, every shadow a potential threat. They navigated the terrain with precision, approaching the enemy's supply route quietly. Emma's pulse remained steady, her mind calculating risks and timing. The team split into positions, each member covering key points. The plan was clear: disable the supply trucks, disrupt communications, and vanish before the enemy knew what hit them. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the distance, headlights of approaching vehicles. Emma signaled her team to hold position. The enemy was moving faster than anticipated. Time was running out. With a swift motion, Emma led the charge. The team moved like ghosts through the night, disabling vehicles with silent precision. The supply trucks were disabled, radios smashed, and the enemy's lines thrown into chaos. The enemy scrambled to respond, but Emma's team melted away into the darkness before they could regroup. The strike was swift, surgical, and effective. As they retreated, Emma's mind raced with what was next. This mission was a turning point, but the war was far from over. The enemy would retaliate, stronger and more determined. But Emma was ready. Her unarmed fight had shown the power of skill and courage. Now, she would lead her team through whatever challenges came next. The dawn was breaking as they disappeared into the forest, shadows once again swallowed by the growing light. Emma's resolve burned brighter than ever. The fight for survival, for victory, was just beginning. The sun dipped low on the horizon as Emma and her team made their way back to base. The night's mission had been a success, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavy on her chest. Every step through the dense forest felt like a countdown to the next battle, the quiet before the storm. The enemy supply lines were disrupted, their communications in chaos, but they would retaliate. And soon, Emma's eyes scanned the fading light, every shadow a reminder of the danger still lurking. She knew that today's victory was only temporary. The enemy would regroup, rearm, and come back stronger. That thought was a cold comfort, but it fueled her resolve. There was no room for hesitation, no time to rest. Her team moved silently beside her, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. They trusted her leadership because she had proven time and again that she could turn the impossible into reality. Emma's unarmed fight against 5 men in that broken village was more than a story. It was a testament to what courage and skill could accomplish against overwhelming odds. As they neared the base, a sudden crack in the underbrush made them halt instantly. Emma's body tensed, every sense on high alert. From the shadows, enemy scouts emerged, their weapons raised, eyes fierce and searching. The team instinctively moved into defensive positions. Emma stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding. "Hold your fire. We're not alone out here." The enemy hesitated, confusion flickering in their eyes. Neither side wanted a full confrontation so close to the base. Emma used the moment to signal her team to lower their weapons slowly. A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of the base's defenses. Then, unexpectedly, the lead scout nodded and lowered his weapon. "You're the woman from a village," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. Emma met his gaze steadily. "I did what I had to." The scout's eyes softened, a flicker of respect breaking through the tension. "You've made this war more complicated for us, but you're not invincible." Emma nodded. "None of us are, but I'm ready for what's next." The scouts melted back into the shadows, leaving Emma and her team to continue their journey. The encounter was brief, but it lingered in her mind, a reminder that war was as much about respect and fear as it was about tactics and weapons. Back at the base, the team was greeted with a mixture of relief and quiet celebration. Commanders reviewed the mission's success, praising Emma's leadership and quick thinking. Yet, beneath the surface, everyone knew the real battle was still to come. In her quarters, Emma sat alone, the weight of responsibility settling over her like a second skin. She thought of the 5 men who had underestimated her, the night in the village when everything changed. That moment was more than a memory, it was a turning point. Her fingers traced the scars on her knuckles, a silent vow echoing in her mind. She would face whatever came next with the same unwavering determination. The war was far from over, but Emma was ready. Unarmed, underestimated, and unstoppable. Outside, the night deepened, the stars flickering like distant promises. Emma closed her eyes, preparing for the battles ahead, knowing that her story was far from finished. The fight for survival, for victory, was only just beginning.